Hi, I'm Mayor John McCann, and we are now going to start the San Diego Community Power Finance and Risk Management Committee. And I want to again welcome everybody. If I could have the clerk do the call to order.
Director Aguirre. Director Yamani. Here. Chair McCann, sorry.
Present.
We have a quorum.
And if we could stand up. And Tim, if you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right. Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Madam Clerk, are there any items that are going to be withdrawn or reordered on the agenda?
There are none.
Okay. And now we'd like to have a warm welcome to our finance intern, Michelle Soto, and native of San Diego, UC Berkeley. So she went to the school where my sister went to, and then major in environmental economics and policy, and a minor in data science. So that's pretty awesome. And Michelle, if you'd like to just give us a couple words and tell us about your background.
Good afternoon, Chair McCann, and other FRMC members. I'm Michelle. I'm a finance intern at San Diego Community Power, and I'll introduce a little bit more about myself and why I joined SDCP. So I grew up, as my slide says, in San Diego. I moved around a lot, but I'm mostly from Southeast San Diego. So like Chicano Park, Barrio Logan, and now like Southcrest. So moving around a lot, it was kind of crazy, but it was very like apparent how like polluted the air quality was in San Diego. So especially where I grew up, it was kind of crazy because all my siblings and I, we developed severe asthma growing up. So like there was a lot of hospital trips, a lot of having to go to the doctor, like checking up and all that. And at first I didn't realize how serious it was until I went to UC Berkeley and I realized that like I was being used almost like a statistic in almost all my environmental science classes. So that's when I really got into like environmental science, environmental justice, a lot of sustainability issues. And I initially applied to SDCP because I wanted to give back to my community while also seeing visible and real action being taken to like improve San Diego. So that's why I'm here, and I'm excited to be able to learn more, especially under Chris and the rest of San Diego Community.
Great, welcome aboard. We will now move on to public comments for items not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
There are no public comments.
Great. We will now go ahead then and move to the consent calendar. Do we have any comments or public speakers for the consent agenda?
There are no public speakers.
Okay. With that, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the consent calendar. Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion or a motion and a second, and then I will go ahead and Madam Clerk, if you want to call for the vote.
Director Yamani, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Aguirre, how do you vote? Chair McCann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
Thank you very much. And we will now move on to the meeting agenda. And we have, again, a great opportunity to have Dr. Washington give us his treasurer's report. So I will pass it over to Dr. Washington.
Thank you, Mayor McCann. I am presenting to the committee.
Go ahead and turn on your microphone.
Is this the?
Yeah, it's right there. Perfect. And then
There we go.
I'll bring that down.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair. So I'm reporting the treasurer's report through fiscal year to date through April 30th, 2024, 10 months into our fiscal reporting cycle. We reported a net position year to date of $167,163,592 after we reported net revenue of $1,058,220,173,000 after expenses of $881,581,000 for the fiscal cycle. So I'd like to note for the committee that our net revenue is about 6% off of where we budgeted. And again, the trend with regard to lower demand due to cooler climate and lower energy costs, we came in 4% under that, aligned with the lower demand as related to demand from our customers. Our physical results through fiscal year 2024, as I pointed out, is shown graphically in the bar chart at the bottom right corner of this slide. Next slide, please. So we contributed year to date, as I mentioned, $67 million in terms of our net position to our reserves. We are slightly behind budget of $202 million towards our reserve build. However, we reported total reserves, including all liquidity, of $474 million fiscal year to date through April 2024. That landed us at about 69% of our reserve build, and we have $0 outstanding through fiscal year April 30th, 2024. Next slide, please. So this slide shows our reserve build over a trend. We landed at 163 days cash on hand in terms of total liquidity, and of that, 124 days of actual cash on hand. Next slide, please. Happy to report that our participation rates continue to be over 95% over all of our jurisdictions. So we're happy to report that the customers that have opted in are choosing to stay with San Diego Community Power. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation of the Treasurer's Report year to date through 2024.
Great, thank you very much. And Director Yamani, do you have any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, and if there's no question, I would move to accept or receive and file Treasurer's Report.
Sounds good. I will go ahead and make a second. And Dr. Washington, I just really appreciate your willingness to provide this great information. And Madam Clerk, are there any speakers on this item?
There is no public comment.
There is no public comment. We have a motion and a second. And Madam Clerk, if we could go ahead and call for the vote.
No vote is required unless you want to.
Oh, this is just accept and receive. So we will go ahead and accept and file this. And we will move on to the next item. And that is the approval of the second revision of reserve policies. And back to you, Dr. Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tim McLemont, our Senior Finance Manager, will present item 3 on the agenda.
Welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Mayor McCann. Good morning, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor McCann, Vice Mayor Yamani. My name is Timothy McLemont. I'm a Senior Finance Manager at San Diego Community Power. I'm here to present on the approval of the second revision to the reserve policy with the recommendation to recommend board approval of the reserve policy. Next slide. So kind of continuing what Dr. Washington mentioned earlier, just continuing our strategy in terms of cash build and cash reserves. There is a slide that Dr. Washington presented that showed our year-to-date cash reserve build. This is the same slide that is overlaid with 90 days cash on hand and 180 days cash on hand. Our current reserve policy has a reserve target of 90 days cash on hand, which we have achieved already last calendar year. And so you'll see above that, there's another target for 180 days cash on hand, which is currently in our strategic plan. And it's a strategic plan goal for SDCP to achieve 180 days cash on hand. So as we continue to build our cash reserve strategy, one of the key recommendations of this policy, if you go to the next slide, Kevin, is to update that reserve goal to 180 days cash on hand. So on this slide, kind of on the left is our old reserve policy. On the right, you'll see our updated recommended reserve policy updates. And I'll point out a couple key areas that we want to update. First one is contribution to reserves. Previously, the reserve policy said that SDCP had a goal to contribute up to 50% of our gross revenue annually. So we recommend updating that to align with our budget and our rate setting policies, in which the board will determine the appropriate rate of reserves to add in any given year. So that's the contribution section of the update to the reserve policy. Kind of the big update, like I mentioned earlier, is to update the policy to align with our strategic goals. So that's to update the goal from 90 days cash on hand to 180 days cash on hand, which I'll get to the next slide in terms of kind of why the thinking behind that. A couple more things that we are trying to update with this policy. We do want to make it much more clear for the board and for the public in terms of how we define reserves. So one of the key areas that we're proposing to update is putting some definitions in there. In particular, we want to define reserves as net position. So you'll see in our budget presentations, in our financial statements, there is a line in there, kind of at the bottom, that says net position each time we present. We want to formally define our reserves to be equivalent to net position, so it's pretty simple and clear for the board and for the members of the public. The other definition that we want to put on there, again, to be extremely clear and simple, is to clearly define what days cash on hand means. And so I say clear, but there's a really long formula in there that essentially says unrestricted cash times 365 days, and then it's divided by the operating expenses for any given year to come up with your total days cash on hand. And then the last two areas I'll touch on are just in excess reserves. So at some point with luck and with guidance to the board, we will hit that 180 day cash on hand target. And so once we achieve that target, kind of the next steps in terms of what we do with excess cash, we want to put two additional potential reserves that we would add to. Again, one of them is in our strategic plan, which is a stabilization reserve, essentially trying to build the reserves that would be available in case of rate fluctuations or power fluctuations should they occur. And then a second reserve, which we propose adding in terms of use of excess reserves, would be a programmatic reserve, which would be available for which we hear from the programs team and other potential programs. Next. So we did do some benchmarking across other CCAs and across other member jurisdictions. In particular, we looked at 4 CCAs in terms of their reserve targets and their reserve policies. We looked at Marine Clean Energy at the top, Central Coast Community Energy, Peninsula Clean Energy, and Clean Power Alliance, which is kind of our closest in terms of customer accounts. Their reserve policies range anywhere from 120 days to 240 days. Again, it's much higher than our 90-day current policy, but it does range across those different timeframes. And those 4 agencies do have investment grade credit ratings ranging from A to A minus. And so it's one of the key indicators and key reasons why I want to update this policy. One, because we built our reserves, but two, to try to attain the same type of credit rating. So again, one of the big updates for this policy is for SCCP to propose an update to that keep reserve goal 180 days cash on hand, which again would align with what a lot of one of our other CCAs have in terms of the reserve targets. Next slide. And with that, Chairman Khan, I conclude my remarks. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on this item?
We do not.
Okay. And do you,
Mr. Chair, did you hear Tim? He said, hope we get lucky. Then he corrected himself and with the guidance of the board. But I think, I mean, moving forward and looking ahead is what we look at this as, the changes or the house cleaning that we have to do to define those language, so then not only us can understand, but also the public that's reading it. I believe this is, sorry. I'm gonna get used to this, Mr. Mayor. So I think this is very well reviewed. And so I mean, moving forward, I just don't know what budgets are for this 4 CCAs. If they're also close to the budget that we have, that's why, I mean, we're close to that reserve. Also the similar reserve that we are also looking at, so they have the same budget as we have. Okay. Do they have the same amount as what we have in our budget? We
Yeah,
do. Okay,
yeah, I guess just to add on to Dr. Washington will get Thursday slide at Dr. Washington.
okay, good, thank you. That's my question, Mr. Chairman, thank you, or my comment, sorry.
Thank you very much. Tim and Chris, really appreciate your guys' work on this. I think it's a really good recommendation for updating the reserve policy. I think I've talked about this before, and our reserves are very, very key, especially as we grow, to make sure that we will be able to be successful. And so, great job. I can't wait till we get 180 days reserves. We're getting close, but we're not there yet. But I know we're going to be doing well. So with that, this is to recommend the board approval of the reserve policy. So I'll make the motion.
I second that, Mr. Chairman, and it's good to have policies like this in place, Mr. Chairman.
I completely agree. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, if you could please call for the vote.
Director Imani, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chairman Kent, how do you vote?
Aye.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to the approval of the investment policy. And Dr. Washington, I'll give it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are presenting to the Finance and Risk Management Committee a recommendation from this committee to approve resolution number 2024-04, adopting the first revision to Senate Powers investment policy. And Tim Maglamont, our Senior Finance Manager, and Chris Stowe, our Senior Financial Analyst, will co-present this item. I'll turn it over to you, Tim.
Thanks so much, Dr. Washington. So kind of just continuing that strategy I mentioned earlier. So as FDCP continues to build its cash, one of the things that we do want to update and recommend an approval for revision is our investment policy. So back in May 2023, the board originally adopted and approved our original investment policy. Since then, there have been some changes. The board also approved in January 2024 the selection of our investment advisor, Chandler Asset Management. And then subsequent to that, through today, we do want to bring revision to that policy, given some of the changes that our investment advisor recommended. Also given some changes that it seems like Chris, in regards to substantial that recently changed. Next slide. So in development of the policy, this is a slide that we used last year. We developed the original investment policy by looking across our first CCAs, across our member jurisdictions, and just looking at financial best practices. And the policy also had a number of objectives that we wanted to accomplish in terms of reporting investment objectives as we continue to grow our cash. And just kind of building on that strategy, just building cash, establishing that reserve policy, but then also having an investment policy alongside that. Next slide.
Hello, Mayor McCann. Hello, Vice Mayor Rigamani. Chris Stowe, Senior Finance Analyst at SDCP. Here to speak on the revisions to our investment policy. The main revisions are listed in the slide. We'll start with SDCP. We'll have a market benchmark provided in the annual report to better assess investment portfolio performance. Next, collateralization language has been added to further ensure SDCP's principle in protected specifically in the uninsured portion of CDs. We've also renamed the diversification section to be called risk management and diversification, and includes supernationals in the list of investment types that can exceed 5% of SDCP's total portfolio in a single issuer. The glossary has been updated with added terms to clearly define their meanings. There have been 4 additional investment types included in the revised policy, and there have been 1 additional investment type including the prohibited investments. Move on to the next slide, please. Chandler Asset Management, that is, has recommended the addition of these investment types to diversify STCP's investment portfolio, reducing risk while generating better returns. These include medium-term notes that should be issued by well-established corporations, financial institutions, or governments. FTNs, for short, offer relative stability to issuers' creditworthiness. We have pass-through securities. While their value can fluctuate with interest rates, they are backed by a pool of underlying loans providing risk mitigation and security. And we have municipal securities backed by the taxing power of revenue streams of state and local governments. These bonds are generally considered low-risk investments. And finally, the supranationals. These are issued by international organizations with the backing of multiple countries, offering a high level of creditworthiness and stability. And next slide, please. And the one additional to prohibited investments was due to the passing of SB 1489. This allowing public agencies in investing in securities with a settlement date exceeding 45 days to avoid the risks such as market volatility that could lead to losses. And the last slide, please. The last slide here recaps STCP investment objectives. STCP promised to deliver the highest standard of care in its investments. STCP also prioritizes preserving ratepayer dollars by investing in safer instruments. STCP will also closely review its liquidity needs to ensure efficient operations. And lastly, with the help of Chandler Asset Management, STCP's portfolio will attain a market rate of return. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
There are no public comments.
Okay, and do we have any questions or comments from our board?
Mr. Chair, I just have a question. I was looking at the report of Chris and it says approved investments. So as a local organization like Sanio Community Power, do we also have the ability to, invest in the community development, financial institutions where there is a reinvestment back to our community? Is that something that we can, is that something that we are allowed or we are by law? Because we are a local community, I wanted, whatever a reinvestment we can, give back to our community as well, if it's allowed from this policy that we're doing.
So I'm happy to start out with remarks on that, Vice Mayor Yamani, but Tim and Chris are free to jump in. So one of the additions to the acceptable investments as it relates to this policy revision points to municipal securities. So that would be a mechanism that we could invest within the framework of our policy that's reinforced by state code that would allow us to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's good to know. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I want to welcome Mayor Aguirre. It's great to see you. And did you have any questions or want to make any comments on this item?
Not at this point, just apologies for my tardiness. We were across the border at the rehabilitation of the sewage treatment plant. Thank you.
Well, I think that was a very important
Yes.
trip for you, and we're just excited to have you here. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the item for the investment policy provision, so we can give that off to the board.
I second that, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, if you could go ahead and call for the vote.
Director Yamani, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Aguirre, how do you vote?
Yes.
Chairman Kent, how do you vote?
Aye.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to item 5, and this will be the 2024-25 operating budget, and I will give it back over to Dr. Washington.
Thank you, Chairman Kane. We are presenting item 5, our operation budget for fiscal year 2025. So we're asking for a recommendation from the Finance and Risk Management Committee to advance to the board for approval resolution number 2024-06 adopting the fiscal year 24-25 operating budget, the fiscal year 24-25 capital budget, and then the fiscal year 25 through 29 capital investment plan. Next slide, please. So this will be a familiar slide to this committee as well as to the board based on what the board approved in our budget development policy that lays out the time frame in terms of budget development and where we are as of today. So we are presenting to the Finance and Risk Management Committee with the next action for this item before the board for approval to incorporate or implement the budget beginning July 1st, 2024. I'd also like to add, this year we also were able to provide for informational purposes to the Community Advisory Committee preview of the budget that will be going before the board for approval. Next slide, please. So this slide is just a reminder to this committee and will be to the board as well of the budget principles that guide our budget development. So for fiscal year 25, again, pointing back to our strategic goal to maintain a sustainable budget and a stable financially stable operation, maintain sufficient funds in terms of reserve to sustain those operations while considering economic conditions that may impact us in the future. Make sure that the budget is easy to understand. So pointing back to the reserve policy, really clarifying what those things are and the definitions so that it's easy to understand and user-friendly. Develop a framework of public agency guidelines and best practices. Engage with the San Diego Community Power Board and constituencies, including committees, as well as the public. And then to make sure that our executive team and board of directors are informed of the fiscal conditions of the agency, and then ultimately develop a budget that prioritizes people, remains transparency, as well as giving focus to our community. So next slide, please. So this slide captures a few of the highlights that are incorporated in the budget, starting with our personnel growth, our staff growth. We anticipate in this budget cycle to grow to 80 staff members. And there's a slide later in the deck that will articulate sort of the breakdown of those additions to staff and how they're funded through the budgeting mechanism. Continue our outreach effort through community events, sponsorships, and advertising. Also added the capital investment plan for non-recurring costs as well as programmatic spends. And then also taking a holistic look at the professional services agreements that we have and identify ways that we might be able to save costs there and overlay that with our staffing efforts. Next slide, please. So this slide is a summary of what we are proposing in terms of our fiscal year 25 budget and how that compares to the existing budget for fiscal year 24 that the board approved an amendment for back in, I believe, February of this year. So starting with gross revenue, we are budgeting for 1.2 in terms of gross revenue. That will land us at 1.7 billion net revenue after we take into consideration uncollectible accounts. We're budgeting for the cost of energy, which represents the largest slice of our budgeting dollars in terms of our fiscal year at 95% of total expenses will be allocated to energy costs at 1,073 million in terms of energy costs. And then, of course, our non-energy costs, our operating costs at 53.8 million, which will land us at total operating expenses of 1.127 billion for fiscal year 2025. And then you'll look to see where we'll land in terms of debt service at 1.3 million, which is significantly lower than what we had anticipated or what we included in our amended budget, much due to just some of the fiscal money management that the finance team, under the guidance of the executive team and staff, that allowed us to identify some reductions in that area. And then looking at what we are transitioning from the operating budget to fund programs and projects for fiscal year 2025, which will give us a total expenses of 1.143 billion for fiscal year 2025. So I wanted to highlight the net position. So wanted to point out that you'll see our net position, although positive at 34 million, it's significantly reduced from what we budgeted for fiscal year 2024. And I'd have to say that I could not be more proud of our staff and our executive team in this budget development cycle, really looking at ways where we could actionalize some of our strategic goals with making sure that we take into consideration the care of our customers, making sure that we have rate options that will assist those that are in need, as well as those that are looking to contribute at a higher level in terms of reaching community climate action goals, as well as the state climate action goals, greenhouse gas reductions. So I wanted to point that out. And it's also important to note that even in those efforts, we managed to not eat into our reserves, although the contributions into reserves are significantly lower in terms of what we budgeted for fiscal year 2025. So I wanted to highlight that for this committee, and we'll do a similar highlight to the board at the upcoming board meeting. Next slide, please. So this slide essentially captures the changes that we factored into the budget throughout the budget development cycle and what those changes are. I won't go into much detail on this, but just wanted to point out again, just taking a look at the information that we have available and really making informed decisions in terms of how we set our budget and how we're looking in terms of the trajectory toward our reserve bill through October 2025. Next slide, please. So transitioning into our capital investment plan, just as a reminder, this plan captures a 5-year period in our capital investment plan spending. And these are just 6 areas that we are focusing on in this fiscal budget development cycle: the solar battery savings program, the regional energy network, as well as some other programs that we are looking to bring online this fiscal reporting cycle. Next slide, please. And so this slide further summarizes what we're looking to, or how those monies will be allocated, as well as additional funds that will come outside of the operating budget to fund our total program spend for fiscal year beginning in fiscal year 2025 of $16.4 million. Next slide, please. This slide is an expansion, one level of the summary presented in previous slides, where we can see from a departmental perspective where our spending will occur for fiscal year 2025 as it compares to the previous fiscal budgeting cycle. Next slide, please. So in terms of our personnel trajectory, as you'll recall in my earlier remarks with regard to highlights for fiscal year 2025 as it relates to our budget. So we are budgeting to grow our staff to 80 staff members, and comparing San Diego Community Power to some of the other CCAs, you can see of the 4 larger CCAs, we're pretty much on par for the most part. This slide also further breaks down that allocation of personnel overall in the different departments within San Diego Community Power compared to those similar departments at other CCAs. Next slide, please. So I wanted to incorporate this slide for this committee as well as a presentation to the board to really break down how those positions are being allocated in terms of a part of the 20 personnel, about roughly 20 personnel that we'll be adding were previously budgeted for, and those positions just have not yet been filled. So we're looking to get those filled in fiscal year 2025. But a net contribution to personnel bill for 2025, we're adding essentially 10 new staff members that have been added to the budget and not carried over from the previous budget cycle. The next slide, please. So this slide is a budget development comparison to other CCAs. And Director Imani, this will go back to the question that you asked in a previous presentation in terms of how our budget compares to some of the other CCAs. And again, I would say that looking at Clean Power Alliance, we're pretty close in terms of where they are in their budget and costs compared to San Diego Community Power. I would note that if you look at the column for the cost of energy, our cost of energy is somewhat lower than CPA, but they have a larger load that they have to serve. But overall, we're pretty comparable with Clean Power Alliance in terms of where we fall out with our budget, where we fall out with our staff bill, and where we fall out with regard to our cost of energy. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2025. So from this committee, we are seeking a recommendation to advance this item for approval to the board of resolution number 24-23, adopting fiscal year 24-25 operating budget, capital budget, and the fiscal year 2025 to 29 capital investment plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers for this item?
We do not.
Okay, and the board, Member Yamani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have to get clarification on FY 2025 proposed for non-energy costs. Can you, can you express what's the increase of 10 million from that? What are these non-energy costs again? Can you define this, please?
Sure, Vice Mayor Imani. Just for clarification, are you looking at the comparative analysis between
yes,
the previous budget?
Yes, from FY 24 amended to FY 25 proposed.
Yes, so those non-energy costs will include our personnel costs, specifically personnel costs. So as I pointed out, we're looking to build our staff and add those personnel to the total staff of San Diego Community Power. So some of those positions were previously budgeted for in fiscal year 2024 and not yet filled, and then we're adding the 10 new positions on top of that. So that allocates sort of a breakdown, and that's the total personnel cost. So that includes benefits, salaries, and fringe benefits as well. I would point out as well, with the staff members that we're looking to add, one of those positions will be fully reimbursed programmatically. So that position will be funded outside of our operating budget. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And for our CIP, from 3 million, from 4 million to 15, can you expound on that more, please?
Yes, if we could go back to the CIP slide, I believe that is slide number 42. Yes, so this slide shows the 16.4 million. So we went from the 3.2 million, which is a carryover from the previous cycle. And so the build is to support the 6 programs that we highlighted in the CIP. For the CIP budget for fiscal 2025. So actually slide number 41 shows those 6 programs. Some of those are pretty significant programming that will be dispersed and managed through our programs team. So that's an allocation of how those funds will be allocated and spent.
But that's spread within the 4-year period, correct?
So what we see in the budget for 2025, so that's what we allocated for this year. This is really the first year that San Diego Community Power has really positioned programs to actually operate in the future periods. So 2025 is essentially sort of a start in terms of that 5-year cycle. So as we roll forward into future periods, we'll see changes to that capital investment plan.
Okay, thank you. And then for our net positions, our target for FY 2025 is 180 days. The report says we are at 145. Is that how 149? So we're missing 31 days.
So yes, and again, we really look holistically at our budget development this time around and realize that by offering 2 additional rate classes to support our customers, number one, number two, be able to actualize our program strategic goal and really start to add programs that further reach out to our customers. And then lastly, to slow down the reserve build to the extent where we're not eating into our reserves, but we're not growing the reserves as quickly. And so we still believe that we can achieve that strategic goal of October 2025 in terms of our reserve build.
Yeah.
So that's, and as I reported in the Treasury report, as of April 30th, 2024, we were at 163 days liquidity on hand, of which 134 days cash on hand contributed to that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mayor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So understand, my question is relating to the CIP, understanding that it's kind of a living document, right? That's subject to future approval of the board, and there's these 6 general areas of investment that we have been presented here. There is here stated that there's 23 projects that that we're looking at, but is there anywhere in the document where they're listed, and will that be available to the public, and how is that gonna work?
Yeah, I believe in the plan itself, I believe in Tim and Chris, help me out here, I believe it does look at or drill down all of the programs that we are looking at and ones that we have in the pipeline. So this initial carve out in terms of supporting the capital investment plan is a starting point, and it could potentially carry over into the future, during which time some of those other programs will be allocated and actually brought online in future periods.
Got it. Okay, so it is, because I didn't see it, but that doesn't mean that it's not there.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But to your point,
Yeah.
it is a living document,
Yeah.
and it's a starting point for us to roll forward into future periods.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Great. And I, again, just really appreciate this budget. And again, it's, as the mayor was saying, it's a living document, and but this is great because I think it's very stable and does not take away any of our reserves, and sets us up for financial success in the future. So I will go ahead and make the motion to recommend this to move it to the board approval.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. And Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers, public speakers on this item?
We do not.
Okay, great. Can you please call for the vote?
Director Yamani, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Geary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Chairman McCann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Motion carries with all directors
But I
voting.
asked him.
Great. Thank you very much. And now if we will move to comments by committee members. Go ahead, Mayor Geary.
I'd just like to thank you and the city of Chula Vista for hosting us now here in your beautiful and very roomy chambers. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we are making some hard recommendations to our board on Thursday, but I think these are all well and diligently prepared for us. And I think those questions that we ask is just to clarify some things that many people ask from us as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hosting us. I said it many times, I'm gonna get used to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, I want to welcome all the staff from San Diego Community Power and the board members. So we love it here, obviously, and I thought this would be a little more easy, seeing that the members here are from Vero Beach, National City, and Chula Vista. We're all South County, and I know some of the members here actually live in South County, and in Chula Vista even better. So just want to welcome you, and we're open to having future dates here if need be. And then lastly, we have one event. If you don't have plans for 4th of July, we have our 4th Fest, which will be at the Olympic Training Center / Elite Training Center, and it's a great event. And if you do have a need to find a place to see fireworks for 4th of July, it's a great place. So we welcome you to come on down. And with that, unless there's any other comments or anything, I will go ahead and we will adjourn the Finance and Risk Management Committee. And we will adjourn that to the next meeting, to the regular scheduled meeting of August 15th, 2024. Again, we're going to be skipping July. And so the next meeting will be in August. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.